Pioneers of Esports podcast. Get ready.
Live, huh? So that's it. We're good to go?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, today I am wearing my reproduction of the 1990 Nintendo World Championship shirt. And why is that, you ask? Well, quite simple. Today we have a very special guest. We have Bob in the house, and Bob was the winner, I'm going to say the missing winner of the 1990 Nintendo World Championships. And I say that because for years we couldn't find this guy. No one could find him. He was just out of the scene for a while, just kind of hiding from the public. That's the way I'm going to put it. Regardless, welcome, Bob. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to get into all of that and so much more. So it's a pleasure to have you here.
It's great to be here. It's great to come out of my non-hiding. I wasn't really hiding from anyone, but apparently I was hard to find.
Yeah, so I will admit that it was Mike Iarossi, winner of the Nintendo World Championships '94, that told me that it was hard to find you. So I can't actually verify if you were in hiding or not. All that I know is that he's really proud of the fact that he found you. So Mike, nice job. If he wasn't really hiding, then I'm going to call you out on that later. Well, very cool. Thanks for joining us today. Like I said, what we do on this show, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but we love to just chronicle the history of video games, specifically around champions and world champions and whatnot. And being that you won your age group back in the 1990 Nintendo World Championships, we're proud to have you here and to kind of get some of your stories, and so you can tell us a little bit of your perspective of those days.
Yeah, it was an amazing time. I was a gamer from a little kid. I was on an Atari 2600 and played that. That was my big console. I had that for a long time, lots of cartridges. I would save up my allowance for that all the time. I remembered what it was like to get a present wrapped in just the right shape of an Atari 2600 cartridge. I mean, I always knew which ones in like a pile of Christmas presents was that one. That was what really got my attention. I loved that game. That console, and I didn't have as many Nintendo games, but I played the crap out of the NES as well. I was also doing a lot of PC games, and then I found out that there was going to be a competition. My best friend back in those days told me about it 2 weeks before the local competition was going to happen. Said, "You've got to enter this," and I went and entered the local competition. My father and I went, and I had no expectations that I would win the whole thing, none whatsoever. I just wanted to have fun and see the Powerfest. I mean, that was a heck of an event that they had with the Powerfest touring all the different cities, showing off the great stuff. I had never seen anything like that. I was just at the low end of the 18 and over age group. I was 18 years old at the time.
Just about to ask you that, yeah.
Yeah. It was my birthday was the local competition was in the summer, and so I was 18 then. By the time the finals happened, I was 19, just starting my first semester of college in between those two as well. So it was a good thing that my father was there to help out, like go to this event. I mean, he was a bit more of a traveler. He'd been to a lot of conferences and things for his work with AT&T and even Bell Labs back in the day. So he was already familiar even with the Jacob Javits Convention Center, which is where the local competition that I won was held. Wow. And so he was just there to cheer me on and just have a grand old time. And now that I'm a father, I see how he was just sort of like cheering on his son to go make him proud in this event. He was not much of a gamer, but actually after the competition he started getting into playing Tetris himself and wasn't too bad.
Nice.
But mostly he was there as my coach and helped me get through, and he chronicled it all. One of the things that I've had and cherished for years is this photo album that he made for me of the event.
Wow.
And I didn't realize that this was so unusual. I thought, hey, like there were 90 finalists that went to the finals. There were thousands and thousands of people who entered the competition.
Mm-hmm.
But back then, it wasn't like everyone had a smartphone that they could just start taking pictures of everything going on. So my father was an amateur photographer, so he took a ton of photos of the event. And so he made this album for me after I won, showing the first of all, the local competition. I mean, I can't really show the photos too well on the video feed here, but photos of the local competition and some of the other finalists in the locals. There's Mike Iarossi in one of these photos.
So amazing.
And what it was like to be there, and then photos of the finals and everything else. So I've been wanting to share this with people who also fondly remember the event, and I've actually started pulling out the photos one by one and scanning them all in.
You're answering all the questions even before we get to it.
Yeah, I guarantee you that was going to be something Chris was going to talk about, is how do we get some of these digital photos so that we can put them up on our page and make sure that it's preserved with the rest of the history.
Yeah,
I will say
some of the best ones already picked out for this event. There's some really
awesome.
Just memorable ones for me.
So we just met recently over in Pomona, California for the Retro City Fest, and I had the absolute pleasure of taking a trip down memory lane with you, looking through your book and everything else. And anybody who went to that event actually got to see it. So I hope that at some point you do make your way to other events so that others can just kind of bask in the glory that is that photo album there. So we highly appreciate you taking care of that for this many years. And you're doing exactly the work that we love to see, which is the preservation of video game history.
Yeah, I loved going to the Retro City Fest, and especially meeting Walter Day there, and how he so much wants to encourage the love of these classic games, and that was inspiring. I mean, I just feel that way naturally, but I'm not around a lot of retro gamers. I know a lot of people who play a lot of modern video games, but not a lot of people who have that same connection to the classic stuff. And it was just fantastic to see everyone there and how much fun everyone was having playing the games that I loved so much. And to see all the things still available for sale. I mean, I came back from Retro City Festival with just like a bunch of, I've got my NES back here with just all like my haul of games that I haven't been playing.
The first hit was free.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. Yeah, I had to go after that event. I had to go make a trade with a gamer friend of mine. He runs an arcade up here in San Francisco, and he had a CRT, because I've been trying to play on LCD monitors, and those are just not great for games like Tetris. So he had an old CRT, and I had something he wanted, which was some old Street Fighter II PCB boards, including a hacked one. So we made a trade for that. So now I've got right behind me here my setup with one of those old classic TV VCR combos. And
love it.
You can record your history.
That's right. Yeah. Record your new Tetris scores. So are you playing Tetris again? Is that kind of like one of your go-to games now, or what?
Oh, you bet. I want to get back into fighting form. I mean, we did a mini competition at the Retro City Festival, and although I did not win by any means, I did all right. But man, it was so much fun. I would love to go future events and have more like just fun events to play that against other people. I don't think I'll get into like world champion form again. I don't think I have the time to do that, but
right.
But I'm definitely playing it again. I'm picking that up and just replaying some of the old classics. I'm even playing Zelda again, although I can't play that because the old cartridge I bought has a dead battery. I mean, some of this stuff, a lot of this stuff survived for a long time. I honestly pulled my NES out of storage and didn't think it was going to work at all. I have a lot younger electronics that have died, but that NES is still working, and I love it.
Yeah. To that point, for whatever reason, my Zelda cartridge still has the ability to save. I don't know how that battery can last 40 years, but somehow it did. So it's really cool to see that like this stuff is still kind of kicking. Well, I guess 30 years, right? But either way, yeah, it's still kicking it and doing a great job of it. So one of the things I wanted to ask you then, because you mentioned that, what are the chances that we're going to see you? I mean, maybe not be able to win the Classic Tetris World Championship. Shout outs to those guys who I absolutely have a ton of respect for. But what about trying to qualify? Do you think that that's in your future? Just maybe pulling like a 400 to 500K?
Oh, I could do that. Yeah, sure. Why not?
Let's do it. Let's get.
I get into form enough to qualify and have fun with it. Sure. I mean,
yes,
that's the way it's going to be for me. With the Nintendo World Championships, I really went there with I wanted to have fun with the event, and I wanted to not embarrass myself. Like, I didn't want to be out in the first round. That was how low my goal was.
The bar was set. Huh?
So the thing was,
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
That was me at 15.
I was playing against my best friend who, while he was a gamer, he was good. We enjoyed playing together. I was, in most cases, a much better player than him. And so I didn't have that competition group to really hone my skills. Now, the Nintendo World Championships was not a directly head-to-head competitive game. It was you against the clock and posting a high score. So you didn't have to have someone playing against you necessarily. So when I was practicing to play this, my father, acting as my coach, helped me sort of reverse engineer the scoring system in Tetris and figure out what made the most points and figure out details about Rad Racer, like the optimum lines for things like that. And so I just wanted to go out there and play well and have fun doing it. In each of the rounds, I was almost never the top scorer in my group. I think it was, there was 2 days of the local competition. You just had to make like 200,000 points, which is very easy to do in the first round. And then the second round, you had to do the best of 7 or
top 7,
but they were all other people who didn't know what they were doing. So the first day was just like barely mattered. The second day, there were 3 rounds, 50 people, 7 people, 2 people. And I was not the best scorer in the 50 people or the 7 people rounds, but the head-to-head, obviously, I was. And then it was the same thing in the finals. It was 30 and then 7 and then 2. And again, the only time I was the best scorer was in the head-to-head round. So
that's a certain medal that some people have and some people don't, and you did it when it counted. That's amazing.
Well, I also didn't have that high of a challenge. My best score was actually in the the third from last round. I didn't score my best score in the end, but I didn't really need to. And what I've really thought about since then is that it's about consistency. It's about scoring well enough to make it to the next round, not trying to score the absolute best, highest score you can on this cartridge, because you're more likely to take risks and blow it in a way that you now have a terrible score. So,
which is why, if you do make the bracket in the Classic Tetris World Championships and go against another player, you could do a lot more damage. I see what you're doing. I see you up there.
Yeah.
He's getting ready. That's right.
Just steady pressure against your competition. That's all it takes. Mike Iarossi tells the story of in the final 7, he beat himself, basically. He took a risk. He went too hard. He tried to do to sneak one extra coin before double Goombas in Super Mario Brothers. Ended up having to kill both the Goombas by accident, and then going on to level 1-2, and that's just, you've pretty much lost at that point. And it set him off of his game so much that he did poorly in the next 2 rounds as well. So
he still beats himself up over that. Yeah.
Yes.
And that's the thing. My job is to not lose. It's not to win, it's to not lose. Now, CTWC is going to be like that for some of the rounds, but that gets really competitive really fast, doesn't it?
Yeah, once you start getting into the later rounds, like, pretty amazing players in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's actually a question for me to ask. Is, you mentioned, it's kind of what your goal was, setting the bar pretty low and so on and so forth. Would you say that was your first competition? Was it your first tournament? Like, what was your history with competitive gaming before that? Had you bumped into anything?
Nothing. I hadn't done any competitive gaming, but it was also, this was the first event of its kind. There had never been a 30 city tour video game championship. This was the birth of what almost could have become pro gaming, except it didn't really take off. So no, I hadn't seen anything like this. For me, I was setting my own goals and playing the games that I knew how to play for just my personal best scores. I remember, like, even from the early Atari 2600 cartridges. I don't know if you guys played the original Space Invaders from that.
We talked to Rebecca Heineman, who won that championship in 1980.
Oh yeah?
Yeah. So that's how far back it goes. But that was only a 5-city tour, so it wasn't quite the scope of the 30 that NWC had. But there was a little bit of precedent there. But
all right. I didn't know too much about that, and I was too young for an event like that, I think.
Yeah.
But as a kid, I just remember setting the goal of flipping the score in any of the Atari games that supported that, and that was, or how many times did you flip?
Mm-hmm. The Activision patches. There was all kinds of scoring challenges back in the day. That the instruction booklet would say, "You're a great player if you do this. Send us your picture."
I didn't do that. I never did well enough at Pitfall to actually get the patch from that. I remember trying as a little kid to map out how Pitfall, like actually draw on little 3x5 cards each of the sections of Pitfall, and you could go above ground or below ground, but they did not map. Like if you went one to the left, it did not mean above ground. It did not mean you went one to the left below ground. And that just blew my mind. Like, this is not reality here. I can't map this.
You know the secret?
No, isn't there a secret?
One screen underground is 3 screens above ground.
Oh, man.
Oh, interesting.
So easy. All right.
So easy, but like, how can you figure that out? I mean, you have to be extremely observant to figure that out.
Yeah, so. I never got that far. Now, as an adult, I actually, about 6 months ago, tried to do machine learning to try and figure out to play Pitfall by itself.
That's
awesome.
Got
the emulator set up and some scripting set up to actually just try to get him running and jumping through the game. So that's the way I want to attack it now. I don't want to map it out. I want a computer to do that for me. That's the hard part.
Very cool. So with that said, what else is it that you did from there? Did you ever do any other competitions? Did you get in any other competitive games?
So after the Nintendo World Championships, I remember I got invited to the Campus Challenge the next year.
91.
Oh, wow.
That didn't work out for me. I wasn't able to go to that. And I was barely able to go to the Nintendo World Championships as it was, because it was between the end of classes of my first semester of college and finals. It was literally the week before I was taking classes, and the week after I had to take all the finals. And that just happened to be when they needed to fly me out to Hollywood. So I was able to do that. The next year, it just wasn't going to work out. And I didn't do anything competitive since. I mean, I kept gaming. I kept playing a lot of games, but nothing that was any kind of official competitions. What I remember from interviews, since after the competition was over, they had me go on press tours with, no, I wouldn't say tours actually, but like calls with newspapers. They had me in a studio doing TV interviews.
Junkets, yeah.
And so, what I remember, like, everyone would ask, since I'm only 18 years old, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? and I said I wanted to be a game developer. I'd always been into computers and games and programming. I was very lucky that I knew even through early in high school what I really wanted to do. And so I spent the next several years just trying to break into a real gaming job. And it took me until 2004. So 14 years before I finally did get into it. And then I found out what a horrendous industry that is for developers. Oh, man. I was in a relatively nice, sane company that they didn't grind us quite so badly. But other people I'd worked with who had worked at companies like EA, when they were really hard to work for, they had nightmare stories of like 60, 70-hour weeks for months and not getting the pay or anything like that. So I only lasted in that industry for about 4 years and then got out. And then afterwards, people were like, you were kind of underpaid at your last job too. I was like, yeah, apparently that's what they do in the gaming industry. I didn't realize. So I got what I wanted. I didn't want it for very long. But I didn't do much competitive stuff. What I did instead was I got into Minecraft a while back when Minecraft was fairly new. Started making a video channel about that. I had my handle for that is Tavi Rider, so I had a series of videos for that, and that was what I did around gaming that was more community focused.
Nice, very cool. So, do you still kind of do that at all? Do you still kind of go on there just to see your old creations, or has that time passed?
I still actually legitimately play Minecraft too.
Sweet.
I just don't have time to make the videos anymore because I became a family man. Now, what a lot of my Minecraft time is actually having my daughter sit in my lap.
Oh yeah.
My older one actually start running the mouse now, and she knows which key is the E key to go forward. Those kinds of things. So we tend to play things like that together. So it's a lot of, dumping lava on things and building roller coasters. Not quite the same kind of thing I used to do, but hey.
My 10-year-old's obsessed with it. So yeah, I totally get it. I mean, I never got into it, but I see the lights go off when she gets into that and into the zone. So yeah. I don't interfere and just let her go.
Yeah, well, next time I see you, I'm gonna play in some Street Fighter. I'll use Guile, and after I beat you, I'll tell you to go home and be a family man.
That
is a reference.
Street Fighter was my game.
See, now we're talking.
Uh-oh.
That is a reference. That's what Guile used to say as his wing quote. So I'll have to use that on you.
All right.
Go home and be a family man. Yeah, let's do it. This is gonna be fun. We'll put it on stream. Make it real interesting.
All right. You'll have to get it'll have to be the old cabinet. It'll have to be Street Fighter 2 cabinet. That's what I had for a little while. Like when I was in that gaming company and I was around people who were as enthusiastic about games as I was able to get hooked up with this group that knew how to actually get and maintain a nice gaming cabinet. So I got a Street Fighter 2. That was my obvious choice. I actually brought it to work and put it in the community room that we had in the building, and it lived there and got a lot of happy play. And when I left that company, I actually left it behind because I couldn't take it home on short notice.
Right. Yeah, I guess I could see that happening. So why don't we do this? Tell me a little bit about what your plans are in the immediate future for some of these shows. Do you plan on going to Portland Retro Gaming Expo to play around with CTWC, or like what are some of the things you want to do?
I don't have any specific plans. I'm not even sure what the good list of places to go is. All I know for sure is that I'm going back to Retro City next year.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But yeah, I need to figure out where to go and when. I just have to arrange the time away from my family. I have to convince me to take care of the girls by herself. But
indeed, yeah.
Up for it.
If
There's
all goes
a few
well,
really good shows.
Yeah, if all goes well, maybe we'll have a panel in Portland, and we'd love to have you on there. So it's a long time for now. I don't make any concrete plans, but that's what's in my mind. So.
And when is it?
Late October. I don't remember the exact dates, but yeah. It's a great thing about Portland is you go to you fly in, you can take the train directly downtown. You don't even have to rent a car if you don't want. So, once you're there, the expenses are relatively low. But, flying there from anywhere other than the West Coast is expensive. But you're in San Francisco, so it shouldn't be that bad.
Yeah, I actually just went to Portland over this past summer.
We talked a bit back at Retro City Fest. And unfortunately, that recording went away because Apple.
Hey,
be careful. We're supposed to be arch enemies. I work for Microsoft. He works for Apple. So,
Yeah,
oh, okay. That's what we're fighting for. The honor.
Right. The honor between our companies in Street Fighter. That makes a whole lot of sense, but it'll work.
Tell you what, how about just you and me versus Facebook?
Love it. That's great. I'm actually in on that. Or Google or Amazon. Pick anyone. Yeah, I'm totally in on that. Hey, like I always say, Microsoft invested hundreds of millions into Apple quite a few years ago now, but we still obviously love Apple.
Yeah, and it probably made more money for them than anything else too. The stock's done all right.
Yeah, absolutely. You're not kidding. Yeah.
But you shared this great. I mean, it's a weird segue. I don't know how to bring it up, but you had this great story about your one of your. I guess it was the round of 7, or the
it was the round of 30. I know what you're getting at. It was when I got accused of cheating in order to win. So this is going to be the first time it's been in a podcast or anything like that. The full story from my point of view, which is that so. it's the finals. We're in the Star Trek Theater at Universal Studios Hollywood. We've spent the last day practicing up in the ballroom and getting cameras in our faces and trying to find human interest stories to generate interest in this event for people who have no clue what video games are and think everyone's going to be total nerds. So they got their list of 10 different people that if you want a human interest story, here's their stories to talk about. Apparently I wasn't interesting enough to be one of those 10.
Well, you're personable though. That's kind of weird because there's a lot of awkward kids in that group. That's weird that they didn't pick you, but I don't know how you were when you're 18.
Pretty awkward kid back then.
Okay.
I was fairly awkward. I was a bit of a late bloomer, let's say. And when they had me on video, I was like this teenager with acne and awkwardness, and they tried to put makeup on me and it made it look worse. It was pretty awful. Thankfully, they didn't do that for the finals. But the finals were supposed to be televised, and they were trying to televise them live. So the event was in the Star Trek Theater with cameras and lights, and it's just this amazing production and fog machines. And so what they do is I'll skip the really embarrassing parts, but what they do is they line up the 30 finalists in each age group, in the 18 and over age group first, my age group first. And each one of us has their own station lined up in front of the stage. And then they do the countdown and we start playing, and I'm playing and I'm doing my best round ever. I'm really doing an excellent job. I have clean runs through Super Mario Brothers and Rad Racer, and in Tetris I'm doing exceptionally well for me. So I wasn't keeping track of the score. Like I said, my job was to not lose in that round. I just had to be top 7, but even if I did, I wasn't going to be too upset.
Right.
But I was doing really well. People in the audience tell me I was on track for a 2 million score, which was going to be more than enough to make it to the next round. And what they do is it's 6 minutes, 21 seconds. With 10 seconds left, they start counting it down. And that's a very important hint because you start dropping your pieces as fast as you can. You maybe even mess up your pattern just to maybe get one
last Tetris. That's right.
It's very different from CTWC. It's everything's slow, everything's dropping, and it's about efficiency more than speed. So I was doing very well. At something like 4 or 5 seconds left, my screen goes blank. And I'm thinking to myself, maybe they already captured the score. Maybe they didn't want to reveal what the scores are to the audience because then they'd be able to figure out, because they want to do have all the 3 rounds and then present the 7 finalists.
Yeah.
So but it's kind of awkward and anticlimactic. I'm like, what happened the last 2 seconds? Whatever. They shuffle us off the stage, and then they pull aside a third of us, about 10 people, to say there was a technical issue. Someone literally tripped over a power cable and unplugged a third of the stations. And everything was lost. There was no video feed from these things. There was no way for them to recover the score or even approximate it.
This is straight out of an 80s movie. This is License to Drive.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead. Dumb jokes, dumb references.
It was I had read through all the rules, and they had all sorts of contingencies. Most of them had to do with if your controller wasn't working, you could tell them that your controller wasn't working, and they would verify it and let you do a makeup round and stuff. They have all this paperwork about that. But what they had was, since this was supposed to be a live event, they had to have the show go on. So they shuffled the 18 and over group backstage, and they got the 11 and under group doing their round. And they had 4 or 6 makeup stations sitting in the backstage. And so what they did was they started getting us to play a makeup round on these things. So there wasn't enough of these machines. They weren't expecting this bad of a disaster, but they had people doing their makeup rounds, and I had to wait my turn while other people did their makeup round. And we're all kind of like, well, this is weird, but this happens. We're going to go on we'll see if we can make it to the next round. And what happens is they don't get their 10-second countdown. The game just cuts off, and no one is used to playing this way. It's not like when anyone tries the ROM, or if you have access to a cartridge or a repro, the game will just cut off at the end of the time. every single time any one of us had played it, we had a 10-second countdown. So it was really part of the game, but not built into the game.
Right.
And so one of the players complained bitterly about this, like, hey, we need our 10-second countdown. And so I think I may have messed this up a little bit. I think I was in that round where we didn't get our 10-second countdown. But what we do is we get another makeup round for this.
Oh no. Stop digging.
So in the round where we didn't get the 10-second countdown, I think it was like 1.5 million, 1.4 or 5, something like that, which I didn't think was going to be anywhere near enough to make it to the next round. It certainly was not as good as the round that I played just outside on the stage. So we play again. So this is my third attempt at this round. And I'm mistelling it again. I'm so sorry. Anyway, so we're playing, and she starts, the woman who's running the makeup round starts counting down the 10 seconds. And so I start dropping my pieces as fast as I can and cover up, mess up my pattern. And she says, oh, sorry. There's 1 minute and 10 seconds left. And so I'm like, oh, crap. And I'm recovering. And I'm sorry I mistold this story. This is the point at which I got the 1.4 or 1.5. And I was like, this sucks. This is like, I'm not going to make it on to the next round because of this screw up in the time, maybe, but whatever. And then, of course, we have now learned that complaining bitterly works. So we complained bitterly about this messed up time. So we get another makeup. So
your nerves have got to be shot at this point.
Yeah.
Because
I played more rounds than most other people in the competition.
Right.
So I've already put in this score of 1.4 or 1.5, and now I'm playing again. We get the proper 10-second countdown, but the problem is this time I screw up. I really blow it. I get like not even 1 million. This is the one and only time in the competition where I really did beat myself. I didn't do well enough, and there was no reason for me not to do well enough. And I was just disgusted at this point because this was what I was trying. My goal was to not lose in the first round. And losing in the first round on top of like, I had two okay rounds, and this was obviously my worst. So I was frustrated. So I just put down the controller and walked out of the room and walked to my seat in the audience where my father was sitting and just thought, well, that's it. Oh, well, I had fun. This was a neat event. I'm going to watch the rest of it. I'm going to enjoy it. I'm a little down, but okay. And then I watched the end of the middle age group's 30-person round, and then they open up the stage and the fog rolls off and the lights are flashing and the way too loud music is playing. And then they start calling up the 7 finalists for my age group, and they call my name.
Wow.
And I had no idea. I was like, and I don't remember. I think they even said the score, and that it was, so what had happened was when I walked away, and I don't know which it was. It could have been that because I walked away, the person who was taking the scores couldn't tell whose score it was. Or she felt pity and just recorded the higher of the two scores. I don't know what happened. I really don't know why my higher 1.4, $1.5 million score counted, but that was the one that got me into the final 7 round. And then the rest is history. I was second best in the final 7 and then first in the final 2. The next day we were at the Hilton. I think it was the next day or maybe that night. We were at the Hilton Hotel where they kept all the finalists. And my father and I are swimming in the pool, and the other finalists are there. And I think it was one of the dads, I don't remember who it was exactly, literally like swims over and says, "You cheated. I know you cheated." Like starts litigating this with me in the swimming pool. And I'm just like, okay, Dad, let's go back to the room. Like we left. He was incensed. He was not happy about this. So obviously
his son was 8th.
Yeah, some part of the story got out.
Right.
Some people knew something happened there. And what's interesting is as soon as the finals were over, as soon as I won the last round, they took me, like, I'm, holding up the trophy, the Mario trophy.
There it is.
Hey.
Just that beauty.
As soon as all the clapping is over, they take me backstage, sit me down on a chair and hand me a piece of paper to sign. And the piece of paper says, you have won the Nintendo World Championships. This is what you have won. You have won a car and a big screen TV and a $10,000 savings bond. And the results of this competition are final. And they wanted that signature on that piece of paper because then if someone came by later and said, hey, someone cheated in order to win, oh, sorry, too late. Competition's over. Our judgments are final. And that was in the rules. It said, once this is final, there's testing it. So, at least, this was the first kind of thing that Nintendo had ever put on like this, but they had the forethought to have the makeup rounds and to have at least enough paperwork, published rules. Compared to what I've seen for modern competitions, the rule book is very thin. So, but they still were able to pull off a competition where, at least I'm pretty happy with results. So
I'd say so. A little biased, I'm sure, but yeah, absolutely. I do agree. I think that Nintendo was well ahead of its time with the amount of preparation. And I mean, just in general, like the entire tour was just such an exceptional event. So much fun. They had so much to do for everybody. There were tons of stations of games that weren't out yet and stuff that were just, it was an amazing event overall. And I mean, you can't expect everything. There's going to be things that are going to happen that are going to go wrong, but I think that they did a great job of preparing for all of that, especially in 90. I mean, 94 as well, but, especially in 90.
Well, I mean, we go back to Rebecca again. Like in the 1980 competition, they lined up the 5 players and they were so good, they were playing Space Invaders forever. And the idea was that the winner was going to be the person who survives the longest. And 4 of the 5 players were still in it after several hours. So they just cut off the competition and gave her the championship because they were bored.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No.
She had the most points at that point, so they said, "Okay, stop. That's over." So it's so even the companies running these things don't have a clue of how good these players are and don't know how the competition's actually going to play out with real players. So even with all that preparation, there was still a major foul up, and I don't think you can ever be perfect. There's just too many humans and too many moving parts, and considering the legend is there's over 1 million kids who played in this thing, they did about as hell of a good a job as possible. And I mean, even with the second chances or however you want to describe it, you still had to win 2 more rounds, and you did. So it wasn't that you cheated, it was that you took advantage of the one little break that you got, but
yeah, I the thing is, I did not, I was disgusted. I'll admit I was angry and upset, which was kind of an overreaction for me. I wasn't expecting that kind of feeling, but I had no intention to cheat. I had no intention to walk away from the score. It's what happened. I thought that, she would write down my crappy score and that was over. Well, anyway, it was a really fun event. It was well run, especially for what it was. Mm-hmm. One of the things that they did well was the announcer. What was his name?
Ray Torok.
Yeah, he was very good, especially since he'd had 30 cities worth of practice. So by the time he was at the finals, he actually knew what the game was like and what to watch for and how to really bug the crap out of the players, because he's like right over your shoulder saying, and Whiteman gets a Tetris.
Boom, Tetris. Yeah.
And,
he used to do that.
So distracting.
Tetris.
The mullet was amazing too, of course.
Oh, that was fantastic. So was mine. My attempt at a mullet. The thing is, my hair is too curly, so I just had this horrible thing sticking out of the back of my baseball cap. So I want to show you one of the photos if I can. Let's see if we can get this up on this video. So this one. Mm-hmm. Let's see. How's that?
Crowd.
Oh, look at that crowd.
That was the view on stage for me, with the lights shining out over the audience, and then right behind me, literally right behind me, Terry saying, just calling out every little mistake I could possibly make. And it was all distractions. So I think having the more just chill attitude, I'm just going to play the game and do my best, help tune out the distractions. It's not like I'm not here to rile up the audience or I've got to beat this other guy next to me or anything like that. If I wasn't thinking about any of that. The only time it hit me was in the last seconds of the very last round when I was like, because I described to you how I was surprised when I was brought up on stage. From there, it was on rails. It was like, okay, get up here. We're going to call your names out. We're going to start. Okay, start playing. And I'm like, I didn't think I was ever going to play this cartridge. Yeah. And then I win in this final, and now I'm in the final two, and they call my father up on stage. I'm like, what's happening here? And then I actually play, and in the final seconds, my hands started shaking, and I couldn't stop them shaking. I was literally having trouble pressing the buttons to drop pieces in the final seconds of Tetris. As it turns out, the results of this last round were not in any way a surprise to the audience. They saw that I was doing much better than my opponent, but I had no idea because I couldn't see my opponent. And so in the very last moments after the game is over, I'm looking at my score and trying to look at his score, and my brain is so fried I can't even do the math to figure out which number is larger. And then they come over and say, and this part is kind of a blank. I don't even remember what happened. I remember holding up the trophy at some point, but I don't even remember. But apparently I won. So yeah, it was a very exciting event right at the end. It was a lot of fun. It was a great memory. And what's wonderful is I keep bumping into people, even though I wasn't hiding. I haven't been hanging out in gaming circles very much.
Right.
But there's so many people who at least remember the event or were there or entered the first round but didn't make it but don't care because they had a fun time. And it's great to connect with anyone who remembers that event. It's kind of funny that I met so many kids younger than me who remember that event barely. Like they were young or, not, even some who weren't even able to play yet. And now I meet them, and they're old people like me. So,
I was 13. I mean, not quite a young kid, but I mean, I didn't make the finals. But 25 years later, when they had the 25th reunion, I made the finals then, and they had Thor in the audience. They had Jeff Hansen in the audience. You weren't there, and I was gonna. That was just, if Nintendo can't find this guy, then maybe we'll never find him. And that's kind of why we thought that you were the lost, because if we figured if Nintendo couldn't find you, then, or maybe they just didn't want to fly out another person in a +1.
I don't know. Yeah. Maybe I was just really bad on camera or something.
No, I will tell you, they supposedly did look for you, and because I know those guys, and I was sitting in the front row too, right? With everybody else.
Yeah.
But I was told by, and I can't remember his name anymore, but he was running the Treehouse back then. We asked him what happened to Bob, and they said, "Oh, we only got to invite Jeff and Thor because we have no idea how to get in contact with Bob." And then, of course, I told that to Mike, and Mike was the one who started searching for you. And like I said, he said that it was pretty difficult to find you, but I don't know if that was true or not. What I do know is that apparently they did look for you.
Okay.
So,
yeah,
Eric Peterson, by the way.
Yep, that's it. Yep.
I keep forgetting his name.
I know.
Yeah,
I'm a horrible person for forgetting it. I've forgotten it a couple times now. My apologies if you ever see this. He's an awesome guy. So.
Yeah, I bounced around the country. A couple of years after the competition, just family-wise, we hit rock bottom. We were in bad shape. Had to sell the house that I grew up in, and I had to drop out of college and all of that. And so I spent the next few years moving around the country looking for just slightly better jobs. And it wasn't until 97 or so 7 years after the competition, that I finally got a job in tech at Microsoft in Seattle. So I was not that far from Nintendo by that time, but They had no way to know. And I was moving around so much that I was averaging less than a year in each place that I lived. So certainly hard to follow a trail of like forwarding mail addresses, since that's all you had back then.
Before the internet, yeah.
Yeah. But,
good point.
I really didn't intend to hide. I didn't know that these kinds of things were big. The closest thing I'd seen is the California Extreme, which is more pinball oriented than anything.
Arcade.
Pinball arcade, yeah.
Yeah. And I went to that a couple of times and loved it, but just didn't get hooked into any kind of community there.
Mm-hmm.
The only place where I really bumped into people who knew what I'd been through was in my high school. I went back and visited them a couple years later, and they told me that after I won, they had an announcement in front of the school, like, school news, one of our graduates actually won the Nintendo World Championships. And so I came back. I'm walking into the school pretty much unannounced. I'm just thinking, like, yeah, I'm this winner. And I'm just like itching to tell people that I won this, like remind them that I won this. And I went into sort of the front office and I said, yeah, I won the 1990 Nintendo World Championships. And a woman behind the desk, I don't even remember who she was, she just basically says to me, you won a car for pushing buttons? And that has stuck with me forever. Like, I did. That's weird. You push buttons and you get a car. I didn't know that was possible. It was just so outside the realm of like reality.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about how far it's come as well. I mean, winning a car back then was outrageous. I mean, granted, you're right. It's just a geo, as Chris just eloquently put. But at the same time, when you look at what people are winning today, you know, the 7-figure salaries, endorsement deals, and everything else, it's crazy to think about, you know. And I always like to tell myself, hey, you know, maybe if I had been born a few years later, you know, maybe I could be a 7-figure gamer. Who knows, right? But yeah, I think it's exciting to kind of see that it's the new sports. Like, to me, watching esports is more interesting than sports. I mean, I know that that's not going to be a popular opinion with a lot of people, but I was never really a sports guy. So for me, watching these games, watching these people push buttons in a skillful way is so exciting. So I'm happy to see the direction everything has gone.
Yeah, I've played enough games to really high level that I have an appreciation for the people who are vastly beyond my skills on top of that. You know, watching CTWC was amazing. Those guys are unbelievable, and I really have respect and appreciation for that. I think it's kind of the same thing. Like, I played football in high school, and so I get an appreciation for watching professional football. I really know just how hard it is. The things that don't make it, that the commentators don't bother mentioning, that are really impressive to me,
right?
Because, you know, I know what it's like to live through that. And it's the same thing with some of the professional gaming. I know what it's like to really have the most intense competition and the practice that goes into it, the work that goes into it. I also know that, like, the Nintendo World Championships, not the Powerfest, but the Nintendo World Championships, I think they were a failure from Nintendo's point of view. They were not what they were hoping for. They wanted it to be this big production. They wanted to literally be live TV, and none of the networks would touch it back then. And obviously, in hindsight, why would they? You know, watching kids staring at a monitor with blank faces for an hour, like, that wasn't going to fly. But that's because they didn't have that appreciation. The same way, you know, for sports. I mean, if you can make like pool interesting or bowling, like, you can certainly make video games interesting because there's some action and people connect with those games, even if they haven't played that particular video game. They still connect with them. Yeah. So yeah, I have a lot of appreciation for professional gaming, and I'm so glad to see it. It's a little bit Hollywood for me. It's like, you know, these overdone productions. You know, right. I want to concentrate on the gaming. I want to appreciate how well the players are doing, and not quite so much glitz and glamour. But that comes from having the large purse to win and having the sponsors and things like that.
Right.
That need some of that.
It has to grow organically. I mean, professional baseball turns 150 years old this year, and Babe Ruth didn't come around until the 1920s.
Right.
So it took 50 years for that to get to a point where you had a superstar that transcended the sport. Now, I mean, our culture is a lot more in a fast forward mode, but it's going to take a long time before we get that person that transcends video gaming and gets everybody interested in it.
I don't know if you guys know this, but League of Legends had their Worlds their major tournament, the World's League. I'm sorry, their World's Tournament for League of Legends. It had more viewers than the Super Bowl, and it was well over 100 million. They say probably around 150 million or so, which is an absolutely incredible number. I would argue that gaming is already surpassing sports, and we're going to see that breakout player soon enough. It's just that right now, there just doesn't seem to be any one particular player that stands out in one particular game that is really escalated, kind of like the Michael Jordan of basketball. Right. So to your point, Chris, I think that is coming. We're going to see that real soon.
And sadly, with the games constantly changing, Fortnite had its 6 month to a year run, and now it's already on the down. I mean, there's got to be a game that's nice and consistent that people can keep up with from year to year to year to year to year to compare against the old greats. So I mean,
it's got to be some evergreen game. That's in the industry they call them evergreen titles. Like they just keep money for them. Tetris is that kind of game. Like you can still play a modern Tetris. It kind of got replaced by the match 3 games, Bejeweled, and all of the later ones after that. So now there's 10,000 different Bejeweled games you can play on your computer or your phone, but it's still all these individual games with slightly different rules and so on. You don't get like the one game that you're going to see like the sports teams every year playing in, and there is a big championship in that game. So it's almost like resetting the season every time a new game comes out, and that's kind of rough. Yeah, you get genres. You can have the fighting games and the RTSs and the MOBAs and things like that. But
but they're continuously replaced. And that's kind of the thing, right? So you have Rainbow Six, you have Call of Duty, you have Fortnite, you have CSGO that still people play, right? But the problem is it's a genre that has no crossover ability, right? And the more, I'm sorry, how did I forget Overwatch? You know what I mean? So like there's so many of these titles that people can focus on. And with that many, you could consider each one of those its own sport, because it's not like you have any crossover between these players. Fighting games a little bit different. You have players like Justin Wong, and, he can go from game to game and win tournaments in just about all of them.
Well, even in fighting games, like, players learning more than one character in a game is kind of rare anymore. So it's even more specialized in a way. And I think also the thing is with esports, there's too much. It's seen as an arm of marketing for a lot of these companies, and it's got to break out of that mold, because as long as it's marketing, as long as it's just trying to push units, the success or failure is going to be seen in units sold, not how many people are watching to watch the sport itself. It's how many people are watching and then buying the game. And baseball doesn't put on the World Series to get people to buy gloves and bats. They just want the eyeballs just to sell the advertising. So it's a different, I don't articulate it that quite well, but it's coming, but it's got to make a jump over to a different track at some point.
Yeah, we need Ford and Coca-Cola and such
to recognize it. Yeah, and with 150 million viewers, you better believe that's coming. So it's an evolving thing, and we're in, we're really at the early stages of the blow up that's about to happen. So
so now I feel like the like one of the classic champions that they pull out onto the Super Bowl to flip the coin or something like that.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right.
And then just get out of the way. Like, you'll get your applause, get out of the way. Let's let the youngsters actually play the game.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I think it's super interesting to see some of the players from '90 come back and compete in CTWC, and that's why I was pushing so hard to see if you were going to go to Portland to try to qualify. I'll give you the example of Dave Lopez. He D-Lo, as he's known, Real Ridiculous, etc. He was a finalist in both 1990 and 1994, one of only 3 people that were. And he's had this rebirth in Tetris. His whole life is flipped upside down. He's having so much fun. He's broken 800K now in Tetris. He's ready to max out. He's pushing, I believe this weekend, he's going to be pushing on stream for a 900K game. I never thought that he could come back and do this, but here's, 40-plus-year-old man who's going to jump right back in head first and be like, I'm competing again. So I think that is super interesting to see that some of the old men like ourselves are able to actually pull this off again if they can put forth the time. I mean, for me, there's no chance. Just work takes all my time, and I'm sure you can appreciate that. But yeah, I think it's awesome that some people are actually coming back. So I really do love to see when 90 finalists come back and actually qualify in there, because there's a few. There's Robin. There's who else were finalists that qualified recently? I can't remember off the top of my head, but you might.
Well,
Oh,
Mike
geez.
Iarossi isn't trying to play that again.
No.
Yeah, he refuses. He could qualify.
Mike Wizenik.
Yeah, Wizenik, that's one. Yep, absolutely.
There's been more than a few, and Thor was in the original one, and
that's right.
Been hinting at making a comeback, but he plays the physical hyper tapping style, and his age is getting to him, and so he may or may not come back. But it is the spiritual successor to 1990. We heard the Robin story on a previous episode where it was his idea to bring the Tetris players back and to recreate the 1990 Nintendo World Championships again, and all these. It's kind of great because I don't know. I'm going on a big tangent again.
But
you were saying how it was Nintendo saw it as a failure, and to that point, this book Game Over, that was the history of the NES era of Nintendo in America. It's like a good 300-page book. There's one paragraph about the Nintendo World Championships in this book.
Wow.
It just mentions that this company did it, and it mentions what it was about, and that was it.
Wow.
So it was barely a footnote in this robust business history. So somebody saw a seed there, because they did do the Nintendo Campus Challenge, and Terry Lee Torak, I've heard interviews with him saying how he tried to make it a thing. He had like a syndicated TV show, and he was also the announcer at the Blockbuster Championships. But Nintendo themselves saw the seed and scaled it back. But you're right. Like as long as this was a marketing arm, it just never had that push to make it a big league TV event sort of thing.
Yeah, if they'd been able to convince the networks that this was more valuable, because what it turned into instead was news. It was on news programs, especially any kind of human interest. Like I was on, what was it, Good Morning America, I think, or the Today Show or something like that. That was probably the biggest interview I was on, and
do you have the tape of that?
I don't know. Here's the problem. So, in going through all my old stuff, I found the VHS copies that my father kept of everything he could record. Two of these are the B-roll or B-reel that Nintendo sent me. This is actually the one from Rogers and Cowan that they sent me. As far as I know, this tape is still good, but unfortunately my TV VCR combo back here spits out every tape put into it.
Put it in it, yeah.
We have access to good VCRs. I've got a good S-Video out VCR that I use to capture my stuff, but somebody's probably got even something better out there. But we'll get that digitized.
We'll figure it out. There's a good chance that the interview is on there. I almost don't want it to get out because it's horrendous.
Of course it is, but that's what makes it so good.
No. It's even worse than that. It's even worse. It's so not only do I have this awful makeup on me trying to cover up acne because I'm under bright lights and a close-up camera for the first time in my life, but the way they did this was they put me in a little tiny studio and somewhere in some little building in Hollywood, and all that's in the room is an NES setup behind me with a TV pointed towards the camera, and a camera in front of me and a wire going in my ear. And that's all that's in the room. And someone, like a producer, comes in and says, okay, you're going to be on this show with this person. Try to use their first name in the interview. And then the interview is just, they put the live audio feed into my ear. And I have to listen like I'm watching the program, but without any video. And I have to stare into the camera and just listen for them to say, hi, Bob. And notice that suddenly the interview has started. And what's even worse is my voice, when I would speak, it would get picked up by the microphone and then broadcast and come back in my ear.
That's the worst.
With the delay. And if you've ever been in that situation, you hear your own voice coming back at you. You think someone's interrupting you, and so you shut up.
Yeah.
So I'm stuttering the entire interview, every single one of them. I can't. just remembering it is horrible. So I don't want to see it hit the light of day ever again. But for the sake of history,
yes, that's what I wanted to hear.
Yes, I mean that's why I'm doing this. My cartridge, the actual Nintendo World Championships cartridge,
I kept it. Good on you.
It actually says on here, this was the cartridge presented to the Nintendo World Championships 18 plus champion Robert Whiteman. So they authenticated the history of this particular cartridge, not just what it is, but how it got to me. And then
I love Wata. Wata's great.
This Mario trophy, this was the actual trophy that was awarded to me. He didn't survive those many moves I mentioned earlier. He was in a box and his arm broke off and part of his mustache popped off and he came off of the base. And it was kind of a sad thing. And I left him in a box for many years because it was too sad to take him out. And when I realized that I was going to go to Retro City Festival, when people wanted to see these kinds of things, I brought him to a professional art restorer and they treated him with the same respect as like a Baroque painting. They really a wonderful job putting him back together.
And so good on them, because they could have thumbed their nose up as like a Nintendo trophy, but no, that's great. They took it seriously.
They really did. They did an excellent job on it. And what they told me, I mean, these are professionals, so they know all about like the paint that went into this. It was gold paint, but it's actually a brass paint that has bronze in it, which tarnishes very slowly over time. So when he was awarded to me, he was bright gold. Now he's kind of this duller, browner color. And I said, is there anything you can do about that? Like, no, it's a chemical reaction. It's never going to change. And it would diminish its value if they tried to do some other color on it or repaint it. That's not what this is about. So they, that's the kind of care that went into it. And I want to actually have these things for people to appreciate, not just sitting in a box in my basement.
Right, exactly.
So did it ever come up in conversation? It's you sort of touched on it, but it's hard to bring up that I'm a Nintendo champion to another adult,
I have the trick.
How do you do it?
So what I do is this is like one of those team building exercises you do when you're at a company. What you do is everyone has to say 3 things about themselves, and one of them is a lie. And so I would make up or only one of them is true, and you have to pick out the true thing. I was like, I met Gary Kasparov, the chess world champion, and I, something completely ridiculous, and I'm the 1990 Nintendo World Champion, and I win that game every time because no one would believe that, like. So, and then you bring it up now.
Yeah, that's great.
Sometimes I bring it up, like if we're talking about Wikipedia. I have a Wikipedia page. Well, not a page, but I mentioned in there, like, okay, the Nintendo World Championships wiki page has that. That sometimes works. But because I'm in software and tech and around a lot of other gamers, I'm like, well, I have some history in gaming. And then they say, why don't you put that on your resume? And I'm like, because it doesn't make me suitable to be a programmer because I won a video game competition. Now, I did put it on my resume when I applied to the video game company.
Right.
But otherwise, no, it doesn't often come up unless I'm talking to other gamers. And then there's a lot of disbelief, and then I tell them to go look it up on Wikipedia, or I show them the photo album, things like that. Mm-hmm. And it's awesome. It's, especially among people who understand and enjoy video games, it's great to tell them that story. I enjoy telling it to them, and I enjoy showing off the photo album and getting them to see what it was actually like to be up on stage. That was something that was, very lucky to have that. My father was brought up on stage for the very last round and brought his camera with him because
thank that man. That's some great stuff. I mean, you're digitizing it, and I hope there's a depository of all the stuff at some point. We're getting up to those ages where we're not going to be able to keep all our stuff forever. So
yeah, I've got it. I mean, he even made 2 albums. Like this is the one that he has the personal note that says, "Dear Bob, hope you enjoy looking at these for years to come. With love and pride, Dad." And it's dated like days after the event. And he made a spare one just in case. You know, he was an engineer, and he knew how to preserve things for a long time.
But I'll bet you he didn't foresee how many other people would actually truly enjoy seeing these collections as well. I mean, he made them for you, and that's an awesome thing, but kudos to him because he's brought a lot of joy to a lot of people now, myself included. Like sitting there and going through that book, it's just amazing.
Yeah, you know, it's the story of the Nintendo World Championships for me personally is kind of a mixed emotion because, as I said, a couple of years later, the family kind of blew apart. Especially financially, and my father was actually a few years later deeply depressed. And it was at the time I think he'd been laid off by AT&T a few years earlier, or he'd gotten a severance package. This was in the mid 80s. They were getting rid of all middle management. There's just the whole concept of middle management, which is what he'd become, was just going away. It was automated out of existence in a lot of respects. And he had started out at Bell Labs as an electrical engineer. So when this event came along, he really dove into it. He really wanted to help me be successful, sort of living through his son to an extent, documenting it, coaching, and a lot of pride after that. And it was such a genuine, a genuine love for his son and enjoyment of the event. It colors everything. All of my memories of it are that my dad was there helping me through this, and then how bad things got years later. It sort of adds another angle on it, because I know that at the time he was sort of hiding from me how bad things were financially for our family and how much trouble he was having personally, emotionally. He was raised in the 50s when, the father is the provider and breadwinner, and what use is he if he can't, pay for the mortgage, for instance. So actually one unusual thing happened when they awarded the car to me. Technically I won it in 1990, but didn't receive it until 1991. And so for tax purposes, you could defer it. Like, I didn't actually receive it until 91, so we owed taxes on a $9,000+ car. Nintendo did not do that kind of thing where they also give you enough money to cover the taxes for it. They just awarded the car, TV, and savings bond, and then I owed taxes on them. At the time, my father was doing my taxes. He was a money kind of guy. He knew how to do that. He didn't report the car.
Oh no.
And what happened was, for years afterwards, he did not actually let me see the mail from the IRS saying that I was getting audited or that I owed them money, and the late fees were piling up and things like that. So it kind of colors all of this in a melancholy way. When I think back to it, that it was this tough time for my family. Then we did eventually get out of that. He was able to get employed again, and it, I dropped out of college, and we figured out a way to make ends meet. So it's, in some sense, it's like the absurd glory years of my younger years, that we went through this together. So it makes the high even higher to see how low things were kind of in the background. So we were already in serious trouble at the time, serious financial trouble, and I had no idea. He literally was keeping the mail from me so I wouldn't find out.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I take it he's no longer with us.
Yeah, he passed away in 2001. He was also, as was typical for people raised in the 50s and in middle management, a very, very heavy smoker, and that's what got him. So it was 2001. So it was 11 years after the competition. So we had a lot of good years after we hit bottom. But there's only one photo in this album of him, and it was taken by, there was a dinner, and they had a photographer coming around with a Polaroid. Remember what those are? Like, Polaroid camera taking photos of each group. And so it's the only photo I have of him at the event. And it's, for me personally, by far the most important one in that, because I don't have that many photos of him. He was always the photographer. He was always behind the camera.
Right.
So, I wish I had more of him like that. But, just he was in the background of every photo there. So I still feel him there.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Here I am just surrounded by all this stuff, like the preservation of things like that. He was an engineer at a time when you learned drafting. So that is the art of making things look really good. I don't have any of his handwriting here. He had the most amazing handwriting that he wrote on these things, and just this perfectly detailed, looks like it's a blueprint because that's what he was trained to do, like actual blueprints. And so he preserved all of these things as an heirloom at a time when I didn't really understand just how important it would be.
He's a hero.
Sure. Yeah. And that's the story that I want to share along with this photo album, as I get those photos out there. Obviously, anything I do is dedicated to him in this.
Oh, absolutely. Like, I talked to some in 2017. They brought back NWC again, and they brought back the kids division. And I reached out to some of the parents after it was over, and I told them, save everything, save every contract, save every email, save every box, save every gift. Like, it's all going to be valuable someday. And I know how kids grow up, and I know how a lot of those 90s the guys from 90, they found that one NWC cartridge that just said Mario, like the whole label had been ripped off, and somebody just wrote Mario on it. It's like, so kids are kids, and thank God you saved your stuff, and some other people saved their stuff. But when there was only 16 competitors in 17, that if a lot of them don't save their stuff, then we're going to forget all that in 20 years. So
yeah, people regularly ask me if I'm ever going to sell this thing and how much do I think it's worth, and I'm like, that's not even an option. I mean, literally, we hit bottom. We had no money.
Yeah,
selling this thing was never an option. Now, maybe there wasn't much of a market for it back then.
It wasn't eBay yet. Yeah,
I've had financial trouble since then, and no, it's just not going to happen. I mean, now maybe that I have kids, if I had to do something to take care of them, I would make the sacrifice. But no, this is gonna be with my family forever. Maybe I'll loan it to collection sometime. But,
yeah.
But I'm not selling anything. I'm not selling any of this stuff. And because I moved around so much, my mother still has some of my stuff, and my brother still has some of my stuff because I lived fairly close to them. So I'm still trying to even just collect in one place all the memorabilia that I have, including like one of those giant Nintendo signs and my tombstone that has my name and
cool
information on it. So I've still got all these things. I remember carrying some of this stuff awkwardly on airplanes to get it back.
Right.
I just need to get it out of storage and preserved as best I can.
Well, luckily there was no TSA back then. They give you a hard time for transporting some of the stuff these days. They questioned me for a good 5 to 10 minutes because I had Iarossi's 94 trophy.
Oh, yeah.
And they wanted to know all about it. They wanted to understand if it opened. Like I'm like, nope, don't stop, don't touch it there, cut it out. Like it was a mess. So traveling with it can be a little annoying. How did you do? Oh, did you drive down or did you fly down?
I flew down.
You flew down. And how did they bother you at all about the trophy?
So this guy, I was getting him fixed up just in time for the event, and whatever they used to attach the ceramic trophy to this lucite, I think, base, it didn't hold up. He broke right off originally. And then when I brought him back for restoration, the restorers were using something conservative. Like they really don't want to like discolor the plastic or have something that discolors the trophy or becomes visible or anything like that. So they use very conservative glues. So they give me the call that it's ready for pickup. I drive out, and literally the woman picks him up and the base drops right off onto the table in front of me. We all just sort of look at each other and like, well, we're going to try that again. So I had to go home, and they re-glued it with slightly stronger, slightly less conservative glue.
Yeah.
and it is not particularly strongly bonded to the base. So I don't know, like,
yeah,
I see myself in the video holding him up by the middle of the body. I will never be able to do that again.
right.
So when I was bringing him to Pomona, I had him packed up in a box with like vertical. He had to stay vertical the whole time, and wrapped in bubble wrap and tissue paper and all this stuff, supporting his arms, and so like he wouldn't fit through the X-ray vertically, and it's a metallic paint anyway, so it would have just lit up everything anyway. So I had like, please hand check this, and I had to cut open the box and very carefully, but I'm not allowed to touch it, so please just, right. If you pick them up by the base and all that. So we had that conversation. They were very respectful and showed a little bit of interest in what it was about, but
that's awesome.
They were very good. I guess they, it's an LA airport. They probably have seen just about everything. So.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I was going off of Portland. Portland's airport was not as kind for that, and also for the 94 cartridge. They wanted to open it, and there was just no way was that going to happen. They considered it a console as opposed to a cartridge, which I had to explain to them. No, this is a cartridge, and it was kind of a mess. But hopefully, they had just instituted the thing that any electronics over the size of a cell phone had to be individually shown and everything else. Hopefully, they've kind of relaxed a little bit on what that policy looks like. So who knows? Maybe it's fine now.
Yeah, you just have to find someone who grew up on the Nintendo, the NES, and then it'll be okay.
Yeah,
I don't know. One thing I want to do is get actually a custom case for this, like actual foam shaped like him or something.
Yeah,
like that, the company. Absolutely. They weren't interested unless I was buying hundreds. So
we'll talk about that. I have somebody who does it for small figurines that can probably hook you up.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, because I want to bring them to any of these events. I want to bring all this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about that offline. That sounds good.
Yeah.
Great. All right. So I think we've covered quite a bit here. What other topics should we even hit on before we call it a night? Is there anything else that you can think of that we haven't? I feel like we've really gone deeper on the 90 tournament than we have with any of our previous guests, which is really awesome.
It's really awesome, and it's shorter too. That's wow. We're hyper mode. We're getting our groove down.
Yeah, no kidding.
Well, we could go into Mike Iarossi and me.
That's a good point.
Let's do that. Yeah.
Yeah, because interestingly, you're both from New Jersey, me too, of course, but you both played at the same arcade, didn't really know each other, as I understand it. Tell us more.
So we both went to Fun and Games. I might have bumped into him before, maybe vaguely remembered him, probably not though. But I have a photo of where I first actually really memorably met him, which was in the local competition at the Jacob Javits Convention Center. And we're both in the final 7 in our age group. And I have a photo of us lined up against a wall looking like we're about to have our mug shots taken or something. But, he has a very distinctive look, this dark attitude and the big hair back then. And
he was Silent Bob. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was memorable. He introduced himself. We talked. We found out we would go to the same arcade and all of that. But we're also about to compete with each other. So we play, and like we both made it to the final 7 in the local competition, and I beat him at that round. He did not make it to the final 2. I'm thinking, well, that was fun. Maybe I'll run into him in the arcade. We actually intentionally met at the arcade. We played Street Fighter 2 against each other very aggressively, as you did when you were, late teens and in a mall in New Jersey. That's what you did. And I remember getting very competitive. That's probably one of the reasons why I enjoyed playing Street Fighter 2 for so long as well. I also kind of remember him really wanting specifically to beat me because I'd beaten him at Nintendo World Championships. So anyway, I go to the finals in Hollywood and he's there. And I'm like,
wow,
I thought I beat you. Like, that's what I'm thinking. Like, I didn't think that. I didn't. I honestly did. I didn't have this competitive attitude, but like, he didn't win. What did he do? And he went to other local competitions until he won one of them. and was showing up at the finals. And that whole concept to me, like that never would have even occurred to me. I was in this to have fun and to play the games. If I didn't make it at the Javits Convention Center, I wasn't going to go to the other local competitions. I didn't think of that. But he was very much he wanted to win it. He wanted to win everything. He wanted to be the Nintendo World Champion. And I remember meeting his girlfriend at the time, and seeing how intense he was about the competition. And then we both made it to the final 7 in the final round, and I beat him again. As I mentioned before, he actually kind of beat himself.
Yeah.
And what I remember also is after I said I went backstage and signed the paperwork. And after signing the paperwork, I came back through this hallway for the second time. It was the same hallway that I came out of before, thinking I just completely lost because I cheated, that whole event.
Right.
Coming back through that hallway, and I see Mike there in the hallway. He's not even in the audience watching the show. He's in the hallway looking genuinely upset, like really down on himself and upset, and I don't want to say crying, but like very clearly not happy about this. And I was kind of an awkward kid, but I had enough of a sense that like there's nothing I can do to help him. I just won. I'm the last person he wants to talk to. But what I do is I find his girlfriend out in the audience. I'm like, hey, Mike's over there. He's really upset. And she says, "Oh, I know. I'm so disappointed in him."
That sounds like her. Yep.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna step away from this one as well. And it also puts in this big contrast with my father, who was so thrilled to even be there. Like, he would never have been disappointed in me if I didn't win the whole thing. But Mike is really a competitive type of guy, and so even more so after that, seeing him at Fun and Games in the Willowbrook Mall, he really wanted to play against me, and I really wanted to play against him. And so the thing is, I have always thought about him in connection to the Nintendo World Championships. By far the most memorable personality from that, more so than Terry Lee Torok or Howard Phillips or any of the other people there. And so when Mike found me and contacted me through Facebook, he's like, "I don't know if you remember me." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I remember you." If you wanted me to name one other competitor at Nintendo World Championships, you're the first person I'd name. So yeah, it was great to hear from him, and now we can just sort of reflect on what we were like 30 years ago. And
so cool. Yeah, very cool.
And
he was equally. He was excited that just to kind of rehash some of the old. I don't want to say rivalry, but he thought it was great to actually just rekindle that with you, and just in a playful way, of course.
Yeah, that was fun. I mean, and I got to give him credit. He beat me pretty handily at Tetris when we played in Pomona. I mean, at the Nintendo World Championships cartridge. Right. He was a lot more polished than I was, but I blame my tools. I blame that I didn't have a CRT. So
I agree with you.
That matters.
It really does matter. It makes such a huge difference practicing on a CRT versus a lag-filled LCD on some silly emulator.
Yeah, now they want to do the Google. What's that?
Oh
Google
the Stadia.
How can you do that?
Yeah. Well, I like to believe that with 5G coming, we're going to see some stuff like that from a few different companies, none of which I have any idea about, of course. But, you have to kind of think that we're right on the precipice of being able to actually do this effectively. Today, it's not going to work. And there's already articles out there of people who have tried it in the gaming industry, and they're saying, it's extremely laggy. I'm not really playing it. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm reacting. I think it'll work well for quick time event games that can be really slow in nature and whatnot, but it's not going to work for real gaming until that latency issue. That last mile is, pretty much the biggest problem that you have.
Yeah.
But I think we're going to see some pretty interesting things along those lines in the very near term future, especially as 5G starts to become more prevalent. So.
It might help, but to me, like I played Quake 3 especially. I played a lot of Quake 3.
Same
I
here.
was lucky enough to have DSL lines fairly early on when that was a consumer thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was always the LPB, the low ping bastard.
Yep.
And you always knew who was playing on a nice network connection versus a dial-up, because the dial-up players had no chance.
And we were the ones using the railgun.
Yeah. And what I remember is learning about the techniques they use to sort of paper over the fact that you're on a relatively laggy connection by doing things like, I played Doom and Quake 1 and then Quake 3, where they started polishing the networking, where they would make the other characters just continue going the same way they were until you hear otherwise over the network. Mm-hmm. So game engine latency, we can paper over that fairly well. You can actually design the game around that. But input latency from the time you hit the button to the time something reacts on the screen, that's the really painful one. Even in a game that has no action at all, you want to play Monopoly over a streaming connection. If you have to wait for a long round trip or even occasional packet loss just to move the focus to where your piece is going, that's really painful. That's where I think, for me, I'm in the middle of San Francisco in a very tech-savvy part of the world. I have an excellent connection available at my desk. It's not a problem. I will be able to do this just fine. I'm sure most Google employees are also going to do just fine. But internet elsewhere is terrible. That's where I think it's going to be a problem.
And aren't there data cap issues? That's the other thing. It's like if everything is constantly streaming, people are running into their data cap issues even now just for watching Netflix too much.
So this is where we start to get into a little bit of a dangerous territory. But I will say that part of the problem has always been a lack of competition. Data caps won't survive, okay? Because once you have the ability for all of these smaller companies, Sprint, AT&T, T-Mobile, and as these companies, or Verizon, sorry, as these companies start to turn around and say, we're going to give you 5G, they all have to compete with each other, but they also are going to be competing with all of the cable modem companies, like the Charter Communications, Cox Communications, things like that. They're going to be competing with AT&T Home Networking, going over fiber and all of this. Data caps aren't going to be a problem much longer. In fact, none of the problems that we've seen with internet is going to be a problem much longer, as it becomes easier and easier for companies to utilize 5G and then 6G, et cetera, as you just have to be able to compete. And unless they all conspire, which is not going to happen, because then a small company could come along and say, I've got a better product, so
okay, so I have that problem here in San Francisco. I would love to have Google Fi or Monkey Brains or Sonic or those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. They can't lay the fiber to get to the neighborhood. There's all this regulatory capture and all this. Correct. It's not even about markets or competition. It's about laws. It's all these tiny little community laws, which is why Google had to walk back all of their plans for rolling out fiber all over the country.
Well, and to be fair, you also have to look at what happened in the markets where they actually did roll out. It was found that customers had no... let's face it, Google offered a better product, but it's not like, they're laying this expensive fiber, and a lot of customers were just like, well, I already have good internet. I don't need to switch. So you're investing a ton of money, and this is why these natural monopolies occurred in the first place with companies like so for example, you take Cox Communications. If they know that Charter is already in a place, there's not really a good reason for them to go and spend a ton of money laying fiber or anything, or copper or whatever they wanted to lay, because even if you get 30% of the customers to switch, it's not very likely that you will, unless those customers are really, really upset with the current provider. With 5G, it's a different story entirely, because now you're over airwaves. It's a lot easier to build that infrastructure, and the companies that are laying the fiber today, they're capping these networks. They're like, a lot of the fiber is just being held back just simply by artificial means because they don't want to provide this incredible service that they can't eventually build up to and continue to tout how it's getting better and better. But as soon as you enter a competition where, you know, these smaller companies can pop up like all of these small cell companies that keep popping up and getting snatched up by the big providers, what happens is it's easier and easier to create this competition. And that's why you're going to start to see all of these companies have to play catch up. Once 5G is prevalent and you have one gigabyte connections over Wi-Fi with very, very low latency, no packet loss and things of that nature, well, of course, Charter, Cox, et cetera, they're going to have to catch up. They're going to have to provide that service. Otherwise, everybody's going to leave their service eventually.
I hope so. Well, you know, the AT&T already rolled out 5G evolution, so they're already.
Yeah, it's a joke. 5G evolution, which isn't even as fast as 4G. Tell me, you know.
Yeah, like the 64-bit Atari Jaguar.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Yeah, if we can get low latency gaming to the world, wonderful. I would love it. I'll believe it when I see it, but I would love to. I mean, what I was doing in the gaming industry, I worked for Glue Mobile. They're one of the mobile gaming companies. Now, I was working on them before the age of the iPhone. I was doing stuff for like the Verizon, the feature phones, all the Nokia and LG crap phones, but they were feature phones. We didn't call them dumb phones because smartphones didn't exist yet. They were just mobile phones. Mm-hmm. And that was a very, very different market. It was very closed. There were two aspects that made your game sell really well. One was the name, and two was how high it appeared in the list of games. And that was it. Like, it really didn't matter. Like, the game name had to have some kind of branding with it in order for users to want to buy it and in order for Verizon to want to place it higher in the list. And that was depressing. It was some crap games I was working on early on. Later on, they got a lot better. Now Glue Mobile. Mobile Iron was my later employer. Glue Mobile did like the Kardashians game, which, as horrendous as that sounds, it made them enormous amounts of money.
Sure, of course it did.
Yes, they've been able to bring in lots of interesting brands. I had a lot of fun doing those kinds of things, including trying to deal with the network latency. Like, these phones could not talk to each other. The packets were not routable from one phone to another, but you wanted to have a multiplayer game. Everything had to bounce off of a server. The round trip times were measured in seconds, like several seconds round trip. So we made an action boxing game very much like Punch-Out. You weren't playing against the other player. Right. You were playing against a bot, and the better you did against your bot, the harder the opponent's bot got. We didn't tell you that, because how were you ever going to be able to tell? You didn't also have a way to match against another player. You were just randomly matched. And if you randomly matched and there was no one to play against, of course you were playing against just a pure bot. So, all this fakery to make it seem like you were playing this boxing game.
Right.
That's fun.
Yeah. So I will say, I do work in the industry. Like I said, I obviously work for Microsoft. I'm a technology strategist for media and entertainment companies, which does include some gaming companies. I will say, without giving anything away, that the future is bright. And I think that we're going to see some exciting stuff coming up around the E3 timeframe. Nothing to do with my company, of course, because that would be bad for me to talk about. But in general, I think that we're going to see some really exciting things this next year.
Oh, I hope so. It's great to see gaming that it's acceptable now. Seeing everyone willing to play a game once in a while. I'm glad that the bubble of like video games cause violence, it's just so thoroughly popped. It was just another moral panics, another in a long series of moral panics. All the research has been done. No, it really doesn't increase any kind of violent tendencies whatsoever. That's not what it's about. No, it's not going to make you fat. It's not going to make you dumb. It's not going to make you antisocial. It's actually part of being social now, because a lot of people play these games. Mm-hmm. Since I did the Minecraft videos, I can suddenly talk to like pretty much any 9-year-old boy on the planet. It's great. Like, we can talk about, hey, what did Mojang add to the game recently? Or have you ever found one of these things in it? And how wonderful is that? Like, I have nothing else in common with your typical 9-year-old, but now we can just have a pure, innocent, fun conversation. I love it. And rediscovering video games with my daughters has been so wonderful. I tried to get them on one of the repro Atari 2600s. That's just a little too primitive for their sensibilities. Now, when I was a kid, that was, oh my God.
Yeah.
That was a crazy thing. But I got them on the NES Classic. They're playing Kirby and they're playing Excite Bike. Excite Bike's a great game because you can't actually lose. You just, you'll always make it to the finish line no matter what you do. And I'm trying to go through them chronologically. Like, we're going to move on to the Super NES in a while and see where we move on from there.
That's awesome. Very cool.
One more 90s story. After all the championships were done, there was the lore says there was an informal match between the 3 champions. Do you want to tell us how that went down?
So, yeah, after it was all over, me, Thor Ackerlund, Jeff Hansen, we had an informal round. I think it was up on stage again. This was after the audience there? Sort of. What was that?
You're going into it. I was going to say, was the crowd still there? You were saying the audience.
Yeah. Yeah, the audience had already cleared out by this point. There was no audience. It was just to play one more round. We'd already sort of wound down from all of this somewhat. I was exhausted, by the way.
Oh yeah.
I was physically exhausted, like as if I'd just played a whole long game of football, for instance. And not because I wasn't sleeping, it wasn't jet lag or anything like that. The event was just exhausting. So I did rather poorly. I was a very distant third. Thor Ackerlund had it very handily. He was far and away the best player there. I didn't see anyone coming anywhere near Thor in any of the rounds. What I remember is the 11 and under age group, or the 18 and over age group was pretty good and fun and fairly competitive. So the results sort of played out in that informal match. Like, if you wanted to crown a single champion, no question, it was Thor. I try to say in the 18 and over age group every time it comes up, like, hey, Bob won the Nintendo World Championships. Well, no, in my age group, and mine was not the best age group, so but it's close enough.
What was the breakdown of the 18 and over group? Was it mostly 18, 19-year-olds? What was were there 30-year-olds? Were there parents? Like, what do you remember from that?
So Nintendo, I don't have the paperwork with me, but Nintendo had a press kit that they sent out to anyone who wanted it that gave bios on everyone, including home addresses and phone numbers.
Wow. Do you have
Before
that?
the days of PI.
I have everyone's original home
Awesome.
address and phone number. And they also send out, remember I said they picked out some people with the human interest stories. They have bios in this press kit as well.
That's really cool.
Like, there was someone who had lupus and there was someone who was, I think, deaf or something like that. And I don't remember the stories, but so I think that the addresses also had the ages. There were multiple families involved where there was a child in one of the other age groups and the parent in the 18 and over.
Cool. I believe Thor's brother was also a finalist too. That was.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. So it was mostly 18, 19, 20-year-olds, and I think they were the most competitive among that age group. But the parents, there were also like sort of the parent age there. I don't remember anyone who was much older who wasn't a parent of someone else there, but I don't honestly remember. We could dig up the paperwork and
no, that's fine. I just was wondering what comes from memory is a little more important and pressing, because if you have to find out the data, that's not. It becomes baseball stats. Because Nintendo was kind of seen as a kiddie company at that point.
Yeah,
and a lot of the kids that played Atari at that age dropped out once the crash of 83, 84 happened, and they didn't come back when Nintendo came back. When Nintendo came back, it was mostly just the kids that came along with that ride. So you were at the top end of that group, still playing your NES and stuff. But kids much older than you probably weren't big into the kiddie Nintendo at the time. So it's just one of those weird. When I try and describe back in the day, I always try to bring up that Nintendo was huge, but it was huge among my age and a little older and younger. But grown-ups weren't playing video games at that point. There was kids. It was thought seen as a kid's toy at that point. So I just kind of.
Yeah. I mean, I mentioned that my father started playing Tetris after that. That was partly depression. He was having trouble actually finding any job at all, and he was just sitting at home playing video games. I mean, the video games have that draw for people who are depressed. They'll sort of lose themselves in games and that little bit of dopamine they get from doing well in a video game. And I saw that happen to him. He, even after he got out of that dark hole, he was still interested in playing video games to an extent, not very much. My mother, as far as I know, never played, never tried it. Now all ages are playing video games. It's amazing. You know, I mean, my wife is not the nerdy gamer type, but she plays games on her phone and on the computer. And, you know, she can at least appreciate all of this stuff that I have in my past and appreciated me going to the Retro City Festival. So it's definitely different from when we were at that competition. It's a whole different world. I wonder what the demographics are like for people watching pro sports or pro gaming.
Pro eSports. Yeah. It's actually a good question that I haven't really thought much about. I'm sure I can come across that data, but I would guess that it's pretty spread out. I actually talked about collecting from that perspective as well. When you think about the big collectors of the ages, right? Cars were the last really big thing. And why was that? Because people growing up in the 60s, they were attached to their muscle cars or whatever the case may be. So when they got older and they started coming into money, they wanted to buy the cars that they grew up with, that they loved. I think that that's why collecting is so big today when it comes to video game collecting, because now the people who grew up on that are coming into the age of where they're starting to make money and they want to go out and buy their cars of the day, right? So I think that a lot of the adults are staying in video games, even if they don't play them as much. I think that they're still interested in them. I think that we're seeing some of that coming of age. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was shocked by the kind of collectors that I met at Retro City Festival as well. Yeah. You know, people with a lot of interest and a lot of money into this, and it's wonderful to see that the respect for what it was and the depth of knowledge. I mean, even from the two of you as well, of course. You know, it's all this stuff that I always thought was esoteric knowledge because I haven't really hooked up with a lot of people who have the memories. And right. I thought I knew a lot about the Nintendo World Championships cartridge, but you know, I'm learning I didn't know that much at all. And the people have really dissected just how the cartridge that I'm a world champion in actually works. I thought it was a rumor that there were pre-made piece sets.
Oh, right.
Tuned it to have more long pieces than the regular cartridge, but it turns out no, it really was exactly what they said, that there's only 7 piece sets.
Yeah, your score in Super Mario Brothers determined which piece set you got.
Yeah.
How much did you actually play that cartridge after you won it?
I played it a fair amount. I went for higher scores. I didn't play the championship cartridge as much as the actual Tetris cart, though.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, and actually 2 weeks before the competition started, the local competition, I didn't even have Rad Racer. I found out about it. And as soon as we decided that I was going to go, we went to the EB Electronics Boutique.
We did too.
In the Rockaway Town Square Mall and bought this crappy racing game, and I started practicing it. But I had they didn't announce the announcement that I saw about it didn't say that it was 20 or there was 50 coins in Mario Brothers and then a first lap in Rad Racer, and then the rest of the time in Tetris.
Mm-hmm.
So I was playing high levels of all these games. I was like playing Mario all the way through, and I was trying the most difficult levels in Rad Racer. And Tetris, you don't get to very fast piece drops at all in the competition. Right. And I was trying to play through to, I don't even remember. I think I have my little original note cards of personal best scores.
Nice.
So I didn't even know what it was that I was getting into until we got there. And then I had to tune my practice. And then I realized most of the practice has to be on Tetris. And so I've loved to play Tetris for years and years since. And I hope to get another real personal best. I thought I had recently, but then I found another note card that had a higher personal best.
That's awesome. Well, David just broke his personal best, so you can do it. I have faith in you. You got this.
I will. Well, if we can just wrap this up, I can get back to practice.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing right now. That was going to be my next thing as well. This has been awesome. Absolutely. So I just wanted to say thank you for all of the time tonight. We appreciate you coming on the show here and kind of sharing your experiences with us. I hope you've had as much fun as we have.
Yeah, this is great. I love talking about it, and I love all the interest in this. So I hope lots of people enjoyed this too.
And I do too. And I will say, I don't think that we're going to see the collection of 1990 memorabilia that we had at RCF at another show. So thank you for bringing out your stuff for that particular case that we had. We'll probably end up putting a picture of that up on the internet at some point. People would love to see it. It is the most comprehensive collection of 90 and 94, just Nintendo World Championships gear that has ever been. So it was awesome. And thank you for bringing out everything that you did, including the photo albums and kind of interacting with the fans. But I do hope to catch you at a future event. We'll talk offline about the different ones that we kind of go to and what some of the more interesting ones are. And yeah, Chris.
It's been an honor. Dory and I started this project a few months ago, and already it's been an amazing ride, and you're a big piece of that. So it's great, and I hope other people take interest. And if absolutely nothing else, now we have a record of these stories on the internet, so that some kid who does research is like, oh, there he is, and these oral stories, the oral traditions are going to go down. So and they're not stuck in your own house now. They're out there for people to enjoy. So.
Yeah, it's great. I've wanted to tell the cheating story for years and years. It's been almost like a weight on my back. Like I need to get this story out and say my side of things. And apparently it has already come out a little bit, but not my side of the story.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
Awesome.
yeah, this is great. I love getting it out there, and I hope that people enjoy this for many, many years. And I hope that my daughters grow up and see this kind of thing as well. I expect them to see these kinds of things, and when they can really appreciate just what it was like.